Montana Territory, 1878. The wind cut through the mountain pass like a knife through cold butter, and Kendrick Ironwood had learned long ago that the frontier rewarded only the hardest men. At 25, he had survived more than most would in twice that time. Indian raids, cattle rustlers, 2 brutal winters that claimed half his herd, and the fever that took his parents within days of each other 3 years past. He sat tall in his saddle now, his lean, athletic frame wrapped in a heavy coat, his dark eyes scanning the trail ahead from beneath the brim of his black Stetson. His jaw was set firm beneath 2 days of stubble, the sharp angles of his handsome face carved harder by experience than any 25-year-old should have to bear. The ranch he had inherited sprawled across 2,000 acres of some of the most unforgiving land in Montana, and Kendrick had sworn he would die before he let it go. That was all he had left now, the land, the cattle, and the cold certainty that this frontier had no room for weakness. Love was a luxury for gentler places, softer times. Out here it got you killed. He had watched his father's grief over his mother turn him frail, watched the man simply give up when she died. Kendrick would not make that mistake. He would remain alone, focused, and alive. But as he rounded the bend near Copper Creek, that certainty shattered like glass. The stagecoach lay on its side, one wheel still spinning slowly in the afternoon light. 2 horses were dead in their traces, and a third screamed and thrashed against the leather straps that held it. Luggage was scattered across the rocky ground, and Kendrick could see at least one body, the driver, from the look of him, sprawled motionless near the wreckage. Then he saw her. She stood 20 feet from the overturned coach, her back pressed against a boulder, facing down 3 men on horseback. Her traveling dress was torn at the shoulder, the deep blue fabric stained with dust and what might have been blood. Her blonde hair, which had probably started the day in some civilized style, now fell loose around her shoulders, gleaming like wheat in the sun. She could not have been more than 23 or 24, and she held a small derringer in both hands, pointed at the nearest rider. "I will shoot the first man who comes closer," she said, her voice carrying clearly across the distance. There was no tremor in it, only cold determination. One of the men laughed. "Little lady, that pop gun would not stop a rabbit. Now why do not you put it down before somebody gets hurt?" Kendrick recognized the voice before he saw the face. Jake Mallory, a known outlaw who ran with a gang that had been terrorizing the territory for months. The territorial marshal had been hunting them since they robbed the bank in Helena and killed 2 men in the process. The woman did not lower the gun. "I would rather die than let you touch me." "That can be arranged," another rider said and started to dismount. Kendrick had his Winchester out of its scabbard before conscious thought took over. He levered around into the chamber, the metallic click echoing across the canyon, and all 4 people below turned to look at him. "The lady seems to have made her position clear," Kendrick called out, keeping his horse steady as he moved closer. "I suggest you 3 ride on before this gets messy." Jake Mallory squinted up at him. "This is not your concern, friend, just passing business." "I am making it my concern." Kendrick brought the rifle to his shoulder, aimed square at Mallory's chest. "And I am not your friend." The tension stretched out like a wire pulled too tight. Kendrick could feel his heart hammering, but his hands stayed steady. He had been in enough tight spots to know that the man who blinked first usually died first. Finally, Mallory spat into the dust. "You are making a mistake, cowboy. We do not forget faces." "Neither do I now ride." The 3 outlaws exchanged glances, then wheeled their horses and thundered off down the canyon, leaving a cloud of dust in their wake. Kendrick kept his rifle up until they disappeared around the bend, then finally lowered it and turned his attention to the woman. She had not moved, still held the derringer in both hands, still stood with her back to the rock. Now that the immediate danger had passed, he could see she was trembling, though whether from cold or shock he could not tell. He dismounted slowly, keeping his movements deliberate so as not to startle her. "It is all right, miss." "They are gone." Her green eyes fixed on him, bright with unshed tears and something fiercer underneath. "How do I know you are any different from them?" "It was a fair question, smart woman." "You do not," Kendrick admitted. "But if I meant you harm, I would not have run them off first. My name is Kendrick Ironwood. My ranch is about 5 miles north of here." She studied him for a long moment, then slowly lowered the derringer. Her hands were shaking badly now, and she wrapped her arms around herself as if trying to hold her body together by force of will alone. The driver, she said. Thomas.
Is he?
I will check. Kendrick walked to where the driver lay and knelt beside him. No pulse, and from the angle of his neck he had died quickly when the coach rolled. There was another body inside the coach, a woman in traveling clothes, older, probably a companion or chaperone. Also dead, he returned to where the young woman waited. I am sorry, they are both gone. She closed her eyes and drew in a shaking breath. Mrs. Pemberton, she was taking me to my uncle's ranch. She was a good woman. What happened? The wheel came loose on the turn, the coach just went over. She opened her eyes again. Those men appeared within minutes. I think they might have been following us, waiting for something like this. Kendrick glanced down the trail where the outlaws had vanished. That would be Mallory's style, patient, predatory. We need to get you away from here. They might come back with more men. I need to bury Mrs. Pemberton and Thomas. And you will, I promise you, but not here, not now. Survival first, respect second. That is how things work out here. She stiffened at that, and he saw a flash of anger replace the fear in her eyes. I know how things work, Mr. Ironwood. I am not some helpless Eastern flower who will faint at the sight of hardship. I never said you were. He was surprised by the sharpness in her tone and grudgingly impressed. Most women he had met would be in hysterics by now. But those men will be back, probably with friends, and when they come, I would prefer not to be standing in an open canyon with no cover. So unless you want to test how many rounds that Derringer holds against 6 or 7 armed riders, I suggest we move. She stared at him for another moment, then gave a short, sharp nod. Very well. But I am holding you to your promise about the burials. You have my word. He gathered what he could from the wreckage, her carpet bag, a water canteen, a few other supplies, while she stood watch with that little Derringer still clutched in her hand. She had sand, he would give her that. Not many people, man or woman, would have kept their heads so well after what she had been through. When he brought his horse over, she looked at the animal and then at him. I have not ridden aside since I was a girl. Then today you get to remember how it is done. He swung up into the saddle and held his hand down to her. Come on, we are losing light. She hesitated only a moment before taking his hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong, and she let him pull her up behind him with only minimal awkwardness. She settled onto the horse's rump, her arms coming around his waist to hold on. What is your name? He asked as he turned the horse north. Delilah Norton. Well, Miss Norton, hold tight. It is going to be a rough ride. They made it to the Ironwood ranch just as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of purple and gold. The house was not much, a 2-story log structure with a wide porch and shuttered windows, but it was solid and well built, which was more than could be said for most homesteads this far out. The barn and outbuildings were in good repair, and about 30 head of cattle grazed in the near pasture. Delilah slid down from the horse the moment they stopped, wincing as her legs protested. She had not complained once during the ride, though Kendrick knew it must have been uncomfortable. Her dress was torn worse now, and she had scratches on her arms from branches they had pushed through, but her spine stayed straight and her chin stayed up. You can stay in the house, he said, dismounting. I will bed down in the barn. That is not necessary. Yes, it is. You have been through hell today, Miss Norton. The least I can do is give you a proper bed and some privacy. She opened her mouth as if to argue, then seemed to think better of it. Thank you. He showed her inside, lighting lamps as they went. The house was clean but sparse, a man's dwelling, no softness to it. The main room held a table, chairs, a fireplace with a bearskin rug in front of it. The kitchen was through a doorway to the right, and stairs led up to 2 bedrooms on the 2nd floor. My parents' room is the larger one, Kendrick said, pointing upstairs. You can use that. I will bring in water for washing, and there is food in the pantry. Help yourself to whatever you need. Mr. Ironwood. Kendrick, if we are going to be under the same roof, even with me in the barn, we might as well dispense with formality. Kendrick, then. She folded her hands in front of her, a gesture that might have looked prim if her dress was not torn and her hair was not falling around her face in tangled waves. I do not know how to thank you for what you did today. You saved my life. Any decent man would have done the same. Perhaps, but not every man is decent, as we both know. She met his eyes steadily. My uncle's ranch is near a town called Willow Creek. Do you know it? Kendrick nodded slowly. About 2 days' ride east of here. Your uncle would be Samuel Norton. Yes, do you know him? Know of him? He runs a big operation, near about 5,000 acres. Well respected. He did not mention that Samuel Norton was also one of the wealthiest ranchers in the territory, or that his spread dwarfed Kendrick's own modest holdings. I will take you there in a few days, once we are sure Mallory and his gang have moved on. A few days, Delilah's eyes widened. I cannot stay here for days, it would not be proper. Proper went out the window the moment that coach rolled, Miss Norton. Right now staying alive is what matters. Those men know you saw their faces. If they think you might identify them to the law, they will come looking for you. Here, at least, I can defend you. On the trail, we would be sitting ducks. She wanted to argue, he could see it in the set of her jaw, but practicality won out. Very well, a few days. After he brought in water and made sure she had everything she needed, Kendrick retreated to the barn as promised. He bedded down in the hayloft, his rifle within easy reach, and tried not to think about the woman sleeping in his parents' bed up at the house. He had meant what he said to her, any decent man would have helped. But as he lay in the dark, listening to the familiar sounds of the horses moving in their stalls below, he could not shake the feeling that something had shifted today. The moment he had seen Delilah Norton standing against that rock, defiant and terrified and brave, something in his chest had cracked open just a little. He did not like it. That kind of feeling was dangerous out here. The frontier took everything you loved, better not to love at all, but sleep was a long time coming. Kendrick woke before dawn, as he always did, and went through his morning routine with mechanical efficiency. Feed the horses, check the cattle, mend a section of fence that had come loose. Physical work kept his mind clear, kept him from dwelling on things that did not matter. Except this morning, his mind kept drifting back to the house, wondering if Delilah was awake yet, if she had slept well, if she needed anything. He cursed himself for a fool and focused harder on the fence. When he finally made his way back to the house around mid-morning, he found Delilah in the kitchen, wearing one of his mother's old dresses that she must have found in the bedroom. It was too big for her in the shoulders and too short in the hem, but she had cinched it with a belt and rolled the sleeves, making it work. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a simple braid, and she had washed the dust and blood from her face and arms. She looked younger now and prettier, though Kendrick tried not to notice that. I hope you do not mind, she said, gesturing to the dress. My traveling clothes were ruined. No, it is fine. My mother would have wanted them used. He set his hat on the table. How did you sleep? Well enough, considering. She turned back to the stove, where something was cooking that smelled remarkably good. I am making breakfast. I hope that is all right. I needed something to do with my hands. More than all right. He could not remember the last time someone had cooked for him. He took care of himself well enough, but his meals tended toward the functional rather than the appetizing. They ate in a silence that was not quite comfortable but not quite awkward either, eggs, bacon, and biscuits that were better than anything Kendrick had managed in years. Delilah ate with good appetite, which he took as a positive sign. She was resilient, this one. Tell me about your uncle, he said finally. What were you going to do at his ranch? Delilah set down her fork carefully. Help him run it. My parents died last year, cholera, and I had no other family except Uncle Samuel. He offered me a home and a position managing his household. He is not married, you see, and the ranch has suffered from a lack of organization. That is quite a journey to make alone. Or nearly alone. Mrs. Pemberton was my mother's cousin. She agreed to accompany me for propriety's sake. Delilah's voice caught slightly. She did not deserve what happened. No one deserves that. Kendrick pushed his plate away. We will go back for them soon, once I am sure it is safe. I will make sure they get proper burials. Thank you, she looked at him across the table, those green eyes assessing him in a way that made him uncomfortable. You live out here all alone. I do. That must be lonely. It is safe, the words came out harsher than he intended. Loneliness does not kill you, but caring about people, letting them in, that is what gets you killed out here. Or worse, it kills them and leaves you behind to deal with it. Delilah was quiet for a moment. Is that what happened to you? You lost someone. My parents, 3 years ago. My mother took sick first, some kind of fever. My father, Kendrick stopped, surprised he was saying any of this. He never talked about it. My father just gave up when she died. He was so torn apart by losing her that he did not even try to fight when the same fever took him. That is what love does, Miss Norton. It makes you weak. Or maybe, Delilah said softly, it gave them something worth living for right up until the end. Maybe your father died because he could not imagine a world without her, not because love made him weak. Kendrick stood abruptly, the chair scraping against the floor. I need to check the herd. He was out the door before she could respond, angry at himself for saying too much, angry at her for looking at him with something that might have been understanding. He did not need understanding. He did not need anything but his land and his solitude, but as he rode out to the far pasture, he could not get her words out of his head. The next 2 days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Kendrick worked the ranch as he always did, and Delilah found ways to make herself useful around the house. She cleaned, cooked, and mended clothes that had needed mending for months. She did not complain about the situation or her delayed journey, though Kendrick sometimes caught her staring eastward with a look of worry on her face. They talked more than he expected. In the evenings, after he came in from his work and they shared whatever meal she had prepared, they would sit on the porch and watch the sun set over the mountains. She told him about her childhood in Ohio, about her parents and the life she had left behind. He found himself telling her about the ranch, about the challenges of making a living this far from civilization, about the beauty and brutality of the frontier in equal measure. He did not tell her that he was starting to look forward to these conversations, or that the house felt different now with her in it, warmer, less like a tomb. He did not tell her that sometimes he caught himself watching her as she moved around the kitchen, noticing the way the lamplight caught in her hair or the way she hummed softly to herself when she thought he was not listening. Those were the kinds of thoughts that led nowhere good. On the 3rd day, Kendrick rode back to the site of the stagecoach wreck with a wagon and tools for digging. Delilah insisted on coming with him despite his protests. They were my companions, she said firmly. I will not let you bury them while I hide at the ranch like a coward. So she came, and she stood with him in the cold wind while he wrapped the bodies and said words over them that probably were not adequate, but were the best he could manage. Delilah spoke too, her voice steady as she talked about Mrs. Pemberton's kindness, about the driver Thomas's skill and humor during the long journey west. They buried them on a hillside overlooking the creek, with simple wooden crosses to mark the graves. It was not much, but it was honest, and sometimes that was all you could offer the dead. On the ride back, Delilah said quietly, "Thank you for keeping your promise. I told you I would. Not all men keep their word. Then you have known the wrong men." She looked at him with an expression he could not quite read. "Perhaps I have." That night a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing rain that hammered against the roof and wind that howled around the corners of the house. Kendrick was in the barn when it hit, and by the time he finished securing the animals and equipment, he was soaked through. He stood in the doorway, looking across the muddy yard at the house, debating. The rain showed no signs of letting up, and the idea of spending the night wet and cold in the hayloft had even less appeal than usual. Before he could decide, the back door opened and Delilah appeared, holding a lamp. "Kendrick, come inside before you catch your death." "I am fine." "You are soaked, do not be stubborn." In the end, he went, because standing in the rain arguing about it seemed even more foolish than accepting her offer. She met him at the door with towels and sent him upstairs to change into dry clothes while she made coffee. When he came back down, she had a fire going in the hearth and 2 cups waiting on the table. They sat in front of the flames, not speaking, just listening to the storm rage outside. "It is strange," Delilah said after a while. "A few days ago I did not know you existed. Now I cannot imagine how I would have survived any of this without you." Kendrick stared into his coffee. "You would have found a way. You are stronger than you think." "Am I? Sometimes I wonder." She drew her knees up, wrapping her arms around them in a gesture that made her look very young. "I was so scared when those men surrounded me. I thought I was going to die or worse. And then you appeared and I just knew, that you would not let them hurt me. You did not know anything about me. I knew enough. I could see it in the way you held yourself, the way you faced them down. You are a good man, Kendrick Ironwood, whether you want to admit it or not." He did not know what to say to that. Good men did not survive out here, hard men did. But he could not deny that something had changed in him over these past few days. The solitude that had felt like armor now felt like prison walls, and he was starting to remember what it was like to want something other than mere survival. It terrified him. "You should get some rest," he said finally. "We will leave for your uncle's ranch in the morning if the weather clears." Something flickered across her face, disappointment maybe or hurt, but she nodded and stood. "Good night, Kendrick." "Good night." He sat by the fire long after she had gone upstairs, wrestling with thoughts he did not want to have and feelings he had no business feeling. She would go to her uncle tomorrow and he would return to his ranch, and that would be the end of it. That was how things had to be. The storm passed during the night, leaving the world washed clean and smelling of sage and wet earth. Kendrick saddled 2 horses and packed supplies for the journey, while Delilah gathered what few belongings she had. She moved through the house slowly, touching things as if memorizing them: the table where they had eaten their meals, the chair where she had sat by the fire, the window that looked out over the mountains. "Ready?" he asked when the horses were prepared. She turned from the window and he was struck by how sad she looked. "Yes, I suppose I am." They rode in silence for the first hour, following the trail east toward Willow Creek. The sun was warm on their backs, and the mountains stretched endlessly in all directions, beautiful and indifferent to human struggles. Finally, Delilah said, "I am going to miss it." "Miss what?"
Your ranch these past few days.
It felt like she stopped, shook her head. "Never mind, it is foolish."
Tell me.
"It felt like home," she said quietly. "For the first time since my parents died, I felt like I had a place where I belonged. Is not that silly?"
It was only a few days.
Kendrick's hands tightened on the reins. "It is not silly. You will be glad to have your solitude back, I imagine." "I imagine." The lie tasted bitter. They rode on. They reached the outskirts of Samuel Norton's ranch by mid-afternoon. It was as impressive as Kendrick had heard. Vast pastures filled with cattle, multiple barns and outbuildings, a main house that looked more like a mansion transplanted from the east than a frontier dwelling. Workers moved purposefully across the grounds, and everything spoke of wealth and organization. Delilah sat straighter in her saddle as they approached, her face settling into a composed mask that Kendrick had not seen her wear before. He realized suddenly that she was preparing herself, putting on armor just as he always did. They were met at the house by a tall man in his 50s with graying hair and sharp blue eyes. Samuel Norton looked every inch the successful rancher, from his polished boots to his well-tailored vest. "Delilah," he strode forward, genuine relief on his face. "Thank God you are all right. When the stage company sent word about the accident, I feared the worst." "Uncle Samuel," Delilah dismounted and accepted his embrace. "I am sorry to have worried you, if not for Mr. Ironwood here. I am afraid your fears would have been justified." Samuel turned to Kendrick, his expression assessing but not unfriendly. "Kendrick Ironwood, I have heard of you. You have that spread up north near Copper Creek, do not you?"
Yes, sir.
"A hard piece of land to work. My respects for making it pay." Samuel extended his hand and Kendrick shook it. "I am in your debt for bringing my niece safely home. Name your price for the service." Something about the way he said it, like Delilah was a package to be delivered, a transaction to be completed, set Kendrick's teeth on edge. "No price."
I did what needed doing.
"Nevertheless, I insist on compensating you for your time and trouble. Come inside, we will discuss it properly." "Uncle Samuel, Mr. Ironwood does not want payment," Delilah said, a hint of steel in her voice.
He helped me out of decency, not for profit."
"Decency is admirable, my dear, but business is business." Samuel turned toward the house, clearly expecting them to follow. "Come, both of you. You must be exhausted, and we have much to discuss." Kendrick caught Delilah's eye, saw the apology there, but also something else. A plea maybe, though he could not say for what. He followed them inside, feeling out of place in this grand house with its fine furnishings and polished floors. They were served lunch in a dining room that could have seated 20, though it was just the 3 of them. Samuel questioned Delilah gently about her ordeal, his concern seeming genuine, but Kendrick noticed he kept steering the conversation toward practical matters. What she had lost in the wreck, what needed to be replaced when she could begin her duties managing the household. "I have been without proper organization for too long," Samuel said, smiling at his niece. The men respect me well enough, but the house has been a disaster. I am counting on you to bring some civilization to this rough place. I will do my best, uncle. I have no doubt. You are your mother's daughter, practical, efficient, level-headed. He turned to Kendrick. You have done me a great service, Ironwood. I would like to offer you a contract to supply beef to my operation. Your herd may be smaller than mine, but I have heard the quality is excellent. What do you say? It was a generous offer, the kind of steady income that could transform his struggling ranch into something secure. Kendrick knew he should jump at it. This was opportunity knocking, the sort of chance that did not come along often on the frontier. But he could not stop looking at Delilah, who sat very still with her hands folded in her lap, her face carefully neutral. I appreciate the offer, Mr. Norton, but I need to think about it. That kind of commitment requires planning. Of course, take your time. Samuel stood, signaling the end of the meal. You are welcome to stay the night before heading back to your ranch. No, thank you, I should get back. The stock needs tending. Very well, but the offer stands. Come see me when you have decided. Delilah walked Kendrick out to where his horse waited. They stood by the animal, neither quite willing to say goodbye. You will be all right here, Kendrick asked finally. Yes, Uncle Samuel is a good man, he will take care of me. Her voice was flat, emotionless. But nothing. This is what I came west for, a home, security, a purpose. I should be grateful. Should be is not the same as are. She looked up at him then, and he saw everything she was not saying written in her eyes. What would you have me do, Kendrick? I have no money, no resources. My uncle is offering me a place in his household, a respectable position. That is more than most women in my situation could hope for. You deserve more than settling for what you should be grateful for. Do I, based on what? A few days' acquaintance? There was bitterness in her voice now, and hurt. You made it very clear that you value your solitude, that attachment is weakness, that love is something to be avoided. So why do you care what I do or where I go? I do not, but the lie would not come. He could not stand there and pretend he did not care, not with her looking at him like that. Goodbye, Kendrick. She turned and walked back toward the house, her spine straight, her head high. He should have let her go. He should have climbed on his horse and ridden away and never looked back. That was the smart thing to do, the safe thing. But instead he heard himself call out, Delilah, wait. She stopped but did not turn around. I was wrong, he said, about what I told you before, about love making you weak. Now she did turn slowly. What? These past few days, having you at the ranch, it did not make me weaker. It made me remember what I was surviving for. My father did not die because he loved my mother. He died because he saw no point in a world without her. That is different. Kendrick. I am not saying this right. He took off his hat, ran a hand through his dark hair in frustration. I am not good with words, but I know that sending you here, watching you walk away, it feels like giving up. And you told me yourself, I am not a man who gives up. Delilah's eyes were bright with unshed tears. What are you saying? I am saying, he stopped, took a breath, made himself say it. I am saying do not settle for grateful. Come back to my ranch, marry me. The words hung in the air between them. Kendrick felt his heart hammering against his ribs, felt the terrifying vulnerability of having said aloud what he barely admitted to himself. Marry you, Delilah repeated slowly, after 4 days. I know it is fast, I know it is crazy. But out here you learn to recognize what matters when you see it. And you matter, Delilah. These past few days, you made that ranch feel like a home instead of just a place I am surviving. I cannot promise you luxury or ease. It is a hard life, and it will probably get harder before it gets better. But I can promise I will work myself to the bone to take care of you, and I will never give up on us, and I will. He stopped, then made himself say it. I will love you the best way I know how, if you will let me. Delilah pressed a hand to her mouth, tears spilling over now. I told myself I was being foolish, that what I felt was just gratitude or shock or something that would fade. But it did not fade, it got stronger every day. So that is a yes. That is a, she started to answer, but the words were cut off by a shout from inside the house. Samuel Norton appeared on the porch, his face dark with anger. What exactly is going on here? Kendrick turned to face him, his jaw set. I am asking your niece to marry me, Mr. Norton. Over my dead body, Samuel came down the steps, his hands clenched into fists. Delilah, get in the house, now. Uncle Samuel. No. But Delilah did not move. Instead, she stepped closer to Kendrick, her chin lifting in defiance. No. No, Samuel looked genuinely shocked. Delilah, be reasonable. This man has nothing to offer you. He is barely scraping by on that hardscrabble ranch of his. Here, you would have security, comfort, a position of respect. Here, I would be your housekeeper, Delilah said quietly. A useful relative you took in out of obligation. That is not the same as having a home. I am trying to protect you. Your parents asked me to look after you if anything happened to them. How can I face them in the hereafter if I let you throw your life away on some cowboy you barely know? My parents loved each other, Delilah said. They had nothing when they married. My father was a clerk, my mother a teacher. They built their life together from scratch. Do you think they would want me to choose security over love, over the chance to build something of my own? Samuel shook his head. You are being naive. Love does not put food on the table or keep the roof from leaking. What happens when the hard times come, and they will come, they always do out here. Then we will face them together. Delilah reached out and took Kendrick's hand. I have spent the last year alone, Uncle Samuel. I have seen what life looks like without someone to share it with. And I am telling you, the hardest poverty is having no one who truly sees you, no one who makes you feel like you belong. Kendrick gives me that. Your offer, generous as it is, does not. Samuel looked between them, his face a mixture of anger and something that might have been grudging respect. You are sure about this, Delilah? This is what you truly want? Yes. He sighed heavily. Your parents would have my head for this, but I can see you have made up your mind. You always were stubborn, just like your mother. He turned to Kendrick. If you hurt her, if you fail to provide for her, if you make me regret this moment. You will never regret it, Kendrick said firmly. I swear to you. Samuel studied him for a long moment, then gave a short nod. Then I suppose you have my blessing for what it is worth. But Delilah, if you ever need anything, if this does not work out, you will always have a place here. Promise me you will remember that. I promise, Uncle Samuel. Thank you. He embraced her briefly, then went back into the house, shaking his head and muttering under his breath about stubborn Norton women and foolish cowboys. Kendrick looked down at Delilah, hardly daring to believe what had just happened. You are sure about this? Are you having second thoughts already? No, God, no, I did not expect you to say yes. She smiled, and it was like the sun breaking through clouds. Then you underestimate yourself, Kendrick Ironwood. Now take me home. They were married 3 days later by the circuit judge who passed through the area once a month. Samuel insisted on hosting a proper celebration at his ranch, inviting neighboring families and making sure everyone knew his niece was marrying well despite appearances. Kendrick suspected it was partly for show, partly genuine affection for Delilah, and partly Samuel's way of making sure the marriage started on solid social footing. Delilah looked beautiful in a simple white dress borrowed from one of the neighbor women, her blonde hair arranged in loose curls around her shoulders. Kendrick wore his best suit, which was not much, but Delilah told him he looked handsome enough to make her heart skip, and that was all that mattered. When the judge asked if he took Delilah Norton to be his lawfully wedded wife, Kendrick said, I do, with a conviction that surprised him. This was right. Against all logic and caution, this was exactly right. And when Delilah said the same words back to him, her green eyes locked on his, he felt something in his chest unlock. All those walls he had built to protect himself crumbling away, leaving him vulnerable and terrified and more alive than he had felt in years. They rode back to the ranch as the sun was setting, leaving the celebration behind. Delilah sat in front of Kendrick on the saddle this time, leaning back against his chest, his arms around her. Neither spoke much, but the silence was comfortable now, full of possibility rather than loneliness. When the ranch came into view, Delilah said softly, It looks different now. How so? Before it was your home, now it is ours. Ours? Such a small word, but it changed everything. That night, lying together in his parents' bed, their bed now, Kendrick traced patterns on Delilah's shoulder and felt peace settle over him like a warm blanket. The frontier was still hard. The land was still unforgiving. The threats that had existed before, outlaws, weather, poverty, had not disappeared, but he was not facing them alone anymore. "What are you thinking?" Delilah asked sleepily. That I was an idiot for thinking solitude was the same as strength. She laughed, soft and warm. "Yes, you were, but you figured it out eventually. Only because you did not give up on me. I recognized something in you that first day. Something I needed even though I did not know it yet." She rolled over to face him, her hair spilling across the pillow. "You made me feel brave, Kendrick, strong enough to choose what I wanted instead of what I should want. You were always brave. You just needed a reason to show it." They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time in 3 years, Kendrick did not dream of death and loss. He dreamed of spring calving season with Delilah beside him, of children learning to ride, of growing old with someone who knew him and loved him anyway. The next weeks and months proved that marriage did not magically erase the difficulties of frontier life. The work was still brutal, the hours long. They lost cattle to wolves and had to track down strays in snowstorms. Money was tight, and some months they were not sure they would make it through, but they faced it together. Delilah proved to be as capable on a horse as any ranch hand, and she learned to shoot accurately with the rifle Kendrick taught her to use. She kept the books and discovered they had been paying too much for supplies, then negotiated better prices with the merchants in town. She planted a kitchen garden that flourished despite the harsh climate and put up preserves that would see them through the winter. Kendrick, in turn, learned to let her in, to share his worries instead of carrying them alone, to accept help without seeing it as weakness, to understand that strength came in many forms and partnership was one of them. They built something together, piece by piece, day by day. When Jake Mallory and his gang showed up 6 months after the wedding, seeking revenge for being run off that day at the canyon, they found not a lone cowboy protecting a frightened woman, but a united front. Kendrick and Delilah held them off from the house for 2 hours until help arrived from neighboring ranches. Summoned by the signal fires, Delilah had prepared for exactly this possibility. Mallory was killed in the shootout, his gang scattered. And the story spread across the territory, about Kendrick Ironwood and his wife who fought like wildcats to defend their home. After that, no one bothered them much. The Ironwood Ranch was known as a place where trouble was not welcome, and trespassers were met with equal measures of hospitality or bullets, depending on their intentions. Samuel Norton, true to his word, gave them the beef contract, which stabilized their finances enough to make improvements and expand the herd. He visited occasionally, always pretending to inspect the operation critically, but never quite hiding his pride in what his niece and her husband had built. "You proved me wrong," he admitted once, watching Kendrick and Delilah work together to break a new horse. "I thought you would struggle. I thought she was making a mistake. But this," he gestured at the ranch, at the obvious partnership between them. "This is solid. You are building something that will last." "We are building it together," Kendrick corrected. "I could not do this without her." "That is what I mean. You understand what matters. Not every man figures that out." 2 years after their wedding, Delilah told Kendrick she was pregnant. He was terrified and elated in equal measure, remembering his parents and fearing history would repeat itself. But Delilah took his face in her hands and said firmly, "We are not them, we are us, and we are going to be fine." She was right. Their daughter was born in the spring of 1881, healthy and loud and absolutely perfect. They named her Sarah after Kendrick's mother, and she became the center of their world in all the best ways. Kendrick discovered that love did not make you weak after all. It made you fierce. It gave you something worth fighting for, worth building for, worth surviving for. The frontier was still hard, but he faced it now with purpose beyond mere endurance. Sometimes, sitting on the porch in the evening with Delilah beside him and Sarah, sleeping in the cradle they had built together, Kendrick marveled at how completely his life had changed from that day in the canyon. He had been so certain then that isolation was safety, that attachment meant loss. He had been wrong. "What are you thinking?" Delilah asked one such evening, the question she always asked when he got that faraway look. "That I almost let you walk away. That day at your uncle's ranch, I almost convinced myself to stay silent." "But you did not." "But I almost did, and if I had, I would have lost everything that matters." Delilah leaned her head on his shoulder, fitting against him the way she always did, like two pieces of the same whole. "You once told me that you recognize what matters when you see it. You saw it, Kendrick. That is what counts." We make a good team, Mrs. Ironwood. The best team, she smiled up at him. A cowboy and his not-so-ordinary bride, building a life in the wildest territory in America. We should be in a dime novel. He laughed, pulling her closer. I prefer the real thing. Sarah stirred in her cradle, making the small sounds that meant she would wake soon and demand attention. But for this moment, Kendrick let himself simply exist in this perfect stillness. The mountains purple against the sunset, his wife in his arms, his daughter breathing softly nearby, and the ranch spread out around them like a promise kept. He had set out to conquer the frontier alone, to survive through isolation and grit. Instead, the frontier had taught him a different kind of strength, the strength that came from opening your heart, from building something with someone else, from choosing connection over protection. The land was still hard, the work never ended, but none of it felt like burden anymore. It felt like purpose, it felt like home. And as the stars began to appear over the mountains, Kendrick Ironwood, who had once believed the frontier had no room for love, held his wife close and knew with absolute certainty that he had found everything he never knew he needed in a woman who refused to be ordinary, in a marriage that started with a rescue and became a partnership, in a life that was exactly what he was always meant to build. The frontier had not broken them. It had forged them into something stronger together than they ever could have been apart. And that, Kendrick thought as Delilah's hand found his in the darkness, was the best kind of destiny a cowboy could ask for.